Welcome to our TED Talk, fireside chat, whatever it is.
Thank you all so much for joining this virtual town hall that we're having with State Representative Jon Rosenthal. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Odus Evbagharu. I am a proud Cy-Fair ISD alum and also the treasurer of our Texas Democratic Party and wear a lot of different hats from day to day, but live in the district. Jon Rosenthal is my state representative. Super proud of that. I wanted to introduce you to his team. We have Ari Azimi, his chief of staff, Devin Daniel, his legislative director, and Karina Gonzalez, who holds it down in the district director. And then obviously we have our state representative, Jon Rosenthal. What's going on, my man?
What's up? So first, I want to shout out to the team. This is literally the dream team, and what Odus did not mention is he literally is also on staff as my senior advisor because I need advice, and Odus is the man. So thank you to my team for showing up, for doing all the work in the background, for holding it down, for all the things that I see you do, and the million things that I don't see you do. Thank you all very much.
Rep Rosenthal, always the greatest with the sweetest words and always uplifting everyone. And the reason why we're here today, right, Jon, is that, I called you Sunday like a couple weeks ago and I was like, hey man, we gotta do a virtual town hall. We gotta talk to the folks about what's going on with these education bills because that's really what's at the forefront right now, especially with vouchers. And today, the Senate conferring on all those amendments that the House put on the voucher bills, and now it is headed to the governor's desk. And let's dive right in. Let's talk about the vouchers. Let's talk about the scam that it is. Governor Abbott's private school voucher plan is being called a scam because it would take money away from public schools, and it's going to force communities like ours in Cy-Fair and Katy to raise property taxes just to keep basic programs running. And some of you are already facing sky-high property taxes as it is now, and you were promised by Republicans that it would decrease, and some of you have seen an increase. So, Rep, I ask you, how would this voucher scheme affect families and schools here in Cy-Fair and Katy since it's passed? And would it really help anyone or just leave us paying more for less in our public schools?
So it's a really good question, and you, as always, are spot on with the framing of this because while Republicans and the governor really frame this as a school choice, it's not that at all. And what it is $1 billion budget black hole that will simply take your property tax dollars away from the public schools and provide it as a subsidy, as a coupon, as a discount for families that have their kids in private schools. Because studies show, and not just studies, but the other states that have enacted similar school choice programs, the vast majority of families that participate in these already have their kids in private school, and the private school costs 2-3 times as much as what the voucher is. So it really is literally welfare for the wealthy. It's a discount for those people who already send their kids to private school. So it's a $10,000 coupon for tuition that's $20,000 to $30,000 in a lot of areas of the state, and that comes out of our pocket. That comes out of the taxpayers' pocket. So that's what it is. It's your money going to subsidize private schools at the expense of our public schools. And anyone who says, "Oh, well, it doesn't affect the school funding, money travels with the child," whatever. I've seen the analysis on this, and it will literally increase the budget deficits that Cy-Fair and the other school district that I represent, KDISD, are experiencing now. It makes that even worse.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that, Rep. Rosenthal. And something that I should have said at the top as well, too, for our attendees, please, if you have any questions, staff is on here as well, too, to answer them. Put them in the Q&A chat so that way we can respond in real time. And then we're going to leave a little bit of time at the end as well, too, to answer some of your questions live. And Rep. Rosenthal can give you answers for that. Rep, you said something that is very profound, is that these vouchers are only going to help a small percentage of folks. And the reason I bring that is because it's the fairness to the 90% of kids. And I bring up 90% because because 90% of Texas students attend public schools, yet vouchers would use our tax dollars to help only a small number of kids, like you said, go to private schools. So I ask you, is it fair that a select few benefit at the expense of the many when most students in Cy-Fair and Katy end up worse off with less funding and support, so a few others can use public money for private education? I mean, these are questions that I get asked all the time in the community, Rep. Rosenthal, and I'm hoping that you can answer some of these as well too.
Yeah, yeah, and I get the same question. So the truth is, between the fact that the private schools are so expensive that a voucher, a ESA, whatever they want to call it, is only a small portion of the tuition at these private schools. So unless you can already afford it or are very, very close to that, you won't be able to use it anyway. So it's really going to benefit somewhere between 2 and 5% of students across the state, where over 90% of all students in this state attend public schools. And so once again, it blows a hole in our public education budgets across the states. ISD's already struggling, and this is going to exacerbate that problem big time. And I hope that we're going to have a chance to talk during this about the school funding package, because we passed two bills on the same day. And one did make an investment in public education, and folks will talk about that. It only takes us halfway toward resolving the gap that we had for inflation over the last 5 years. So it makes up a little bit of ground. Something is always better than nothing, but listen, it does not address our budget shortfall in Cy-Fair or KDISD. And then you put this voucher thing on top of that, and it blows a hole in our budgets. It's going to be worse than it even already is.
Rep, I love how we're always on the same brain wavelength, excuse me, because I was just about to talk to you about funding and how it's been held hostage. For those of you that don't know, last year Texas public schools missed out on a $7.6 billion funding boost. That's B with a billion, because the governor held it hostage when voucher plans failed to pass. And so that means communities like Cy-Fair and Katy schools lost money that could have helped students and teachers. So, Rep, I ask you, how do we stop our kids from being used as political pawns in these fights like that? And shouldn't funding our local schools be more important than pushing a voucher scheme?
Listen, this is I love the way sometimes I feel like we share the same brain, you know. It's uncanny, but that's the deal. So the Constitution of the state, Section 7, or Article 7, Section 1, whatever that is, this state constitutionally mandates that we make provision for public schools for our kids, and that's just, this is antithetical to that, and the governor holding funding hostage last session. Y'all, we had four called sessions, four special sessions. So folks that say, oh, the legislature is a part-time job, it's only 140 days every other year. We spent 8.5 months in this building. I'm sitting in the Capitol right now, because we would not pass the governor's, pet project vouchers. And he called special session after special session. We did not capitulate. And then he went ahead and went after all of the rural Republicans that wanted to support their own local school districts, and took half of them out, and made a more favorable situation for this by supporting the campaigns against solid incumbents, supporting the campaigns of these challengers who he thought would help him pass the vouchers. And so then we come in. He got pretty close, and it was going to be a very close call. But it is now public information that the governor was calling individual representatives' offices and threatening them to veto all of their legislation if they even voted against if they voted against this voucher thing in any way, or if they were willing to vote for an amendment that we brought that would have sent this question to the voters of Texas as a statewide referendum. So even if they just said, oh, yeah, let the voters weigh in, he was going to veto every bill they had and then spend another, whatever, millions and millions of dollars against incumbents in their primaries to take them out. And of course, he didn't campaign on vouchers. Those campaigns were run
Right.
With fake news, calling them weak on border security and rhinos because they worked with Democrats, and all that kind of jazz. And he gets rid of a bunch of these folks and then threatens the ones who are here, and then literally wheels into the House Republican Caucus meeting with his cell phone with President Donald Trump on the phone, and used the president of the United States to coerce, who actually said, oh, we should return this to the states, right? Get rid of the Department of Education, return it to the states. But then the president is weighing in on our state public education stuff. And then, so instead of having a 1 or 2 vote margin, which is what we thought we'd have, the Republicans on a complete party line vote on every amendment, on every motion, on every piece of this, whatever it was. We had a 15-hour debate in this building where we were going after those folks and bringing amendments and points of order and all that jazz. And they all voted against their public schools every single time, all the way up to and including the vote on the final voucher. So the governor got his way by threatening our representatives, and it's just not the way the government is supposed to work. And this is going to screw over public education in Texas.
Yeah, and Rep Rosenthal, to level set with some of our attendees here. I mean, Rep is talking about something that I think a lot of people miss, because some of us who are just caught up in our own democratic world, right? We're on one side of the political aisle and we're not thinking about the other political aisle of what happened last election cycle in the 2024 primaries and the Republican primaries. About 20 or so Republican incumbents lost their seats because there was a bipartisan effort to defeat vouchers in the last legislative session. And so Governor Abbott got a lot of money, particularly $12 million from a billionaire up in Pennsylvania, a man by the name of Jeff Yoss, who they took that money, they took out a bunch of incumbents in rural areas, and they pretty much said that, oh, vouchers, 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 but it wasn't that, right? The framing was they were weak on the border. And what's even more funny about that, right, Rep, is that these same Republicans are the ones that voted for the same border bill that the governor signed that he said they were weak on. And Rep, one of the things that I want you to kind of expound on is some of the amendments that they voted down. I mean, some of the conversations you and I had were like, this is ridiculous about some of the people who could access the money, or who we were trying to deny the money to, like, let's say folks who may have been convicted of a sexual crime, right? Like things like that. And I just want you to talk a little bit about some of those amendments that got voted down by Republicans that should have been in this bill if they were when they passed vouchers out.
Yeah, no kidding, right? I'm more than happy to talk about that. And let's start with the framing that this is $1 billion package. It's $1 billion in your state budget. Every penny of that is going to go to these wealthy people that contributed to the governor's campaign war chest. So they give him what, $12 million, and he spent half of that in the primaries, and in return for their $12 million investment, they get a $1 billion windfall from us, from the taxpayers. So it's definitely, this just goes to benefit the owners of the private schools, not the kids or anything else. So during a 15-hour floor debate, I was literally awake for 24 straight hours on that day, because I'm always up early and on the floor early. And then we get into it, right? And so first they voted down the amendment proposal to send this to a statewide referendum. So they literally don't want their voters to weigh in. this is on top of the fact that their Republican Party chair of the state of Texas advised their members not to have town halls. Like, no, 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 don't meet with the people you represent because you'll just get shouted down in those town halls. Heaven forbid representatives should meet with their constituents. So there's that. We had an amendment that actually they took last time that would not allow members of the legislature to participate in the program. Like, you're in the legislature, you should not be voting on a bill that allows you to take home $10,000 per child per semester or school year, whatever it is.
Per school.
Like for the school year.
Yeah.
So if you got 2 or 3, or some of these reps have 4 or 5 kids, let's just say you have 5 kids and it's $10,000 each per year, $50,000 a year you get to take home because you voted yes for this program. And they were like, yeah, no, we're cool with benefiting ourselves that way. I'm happy to take the discount on my private school for my children. So that was one. We offered one that said any family, we had a couple of these. So any family where the household income was over $1 million a year should not be able to participate, because no, you don't need a discount on your private schools if you're making $1 million a year. And they voted that stuff down. And I think we also did one. It was based on area median income and whatever that was, 500% of that. So it was families making, I think, I don't remember, it was $250,000 or $500,000 a year, something like that. And they voted that one down. So they refused to put caps on who could qualify for this. They refused to put a floor on it, like the only people you should consider, or the first people you should consider, are the ones, at the slower level, whatever that was. Or that we should give extra money to the poor kids. If you actually want those poor children from poorer families and neighborhoods to go to these schools, how about you give them twice or whatever? And they were like, oh, hell no, we're not going to do that. And they all voted against that one too. And then the sex offender one was, I believe it was for owners or board of directors for the private school. If they had, if they were a registered sex offender, the school couldn't get the voucher money, and they voted that one down too. So they don't care about children. They just care about giving money to their wealthy donors.
Right. And also too, was a bipartisan. There was 2 Republicans who voted no. Gary Van Beaver, who is a public education stalwart. I believe he was a superintendent for one of the school districts in his district.
He was, yeah.
And then Dade Phelan, who was a former speaker, he's still a state rep, and they spent a lot of money against him in his own district, where he won his seat by 300 plus votes or so. So 2 Republicans voted no, but it was really straight party down the line vote, because they got threatened about these primaries. And it doesn't surprise us that Texas and the Republican leaders and our leaders right now have no political courage, because we see it in the funding for public education. We talk about being a prosperous business state, but our education is so low. I mean, we lag behind so many other states. Texas currently ranks in the bottom third among students in per student school funding, which means our kids are getting much less investment in their education compared to students elsewhere, particularly Black and brown kids. And I really want to emphasize that Black and brown kids who benefit from public education like I did, and it shaped me. And thank God that, my parents moved to Cy-Fair, because we have the greatest school district on the face of the planet, I tell everybody. But with that being said, being in the bottom third, Rep, tell us a little bit why we're in the bottom third in funding, and don't students in the Houston area, particularly our communities here in Cy-Fair and Katy, deserve the same support and resources as kids in higher ranking states?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So this is actually the heart of the matter right here, because while we are the second wealthiest state in the union, we have, if Texas was a country, we would have what, the 8th largest GDP of any country in the world, and with that, we are 46th in the union in terms of what we spend per child in our public schools in this state in Texas. Number 46 out of 50, when we are the second wealthiest state in the United States and the eighth largest economy on the planet, just the state of Texas. So it's mind-boggling to begin with, especially when public education is a constitutional requirement as far as it goes. That's the only thing we're actually required to spend money on in the Constitution of the state. We're not even required to spend money on state government. I always joke about how we're all volunteers, but literally that's how it started out, right? We're all volunteers. So this is part of a historic pattern, at least for the last 30 years. And like, I'm sorry to make it a partisan issue, but it's the Republicans who have been in charge. And under their leadership for the last 30 years, this is where we've gone. And anybody that's got complaints actually about anything going wrong in this state, it's been led by by the same folks basically for 30 years. So there has been a systematic, consistent, time built over time effort to undermine and underfund our public schools and undermine the confidence in public schools, dismantle the system, to privatize them, and use children for profit. And that is about what this is. That is exactly what's happening. They're trying to push their private schools. You're going to have, once this starts up and it's $1 billion program, you'll have private school startups happening. Right. 2/3 of the counties in the state don't have a single private school. So right. All those Republicans voting for this in those 150 counties or whatever it is, sorry, but none of your kids are going to benefit from that. And as it defunds public education overall, there's less money to go around for everybody. So they undermine the confidence in public schools. And I'm going to add another layer onto this for those that joined a few minutes early. We were talking about how the commissioner of education for the state of Texas has literally moved the goalposts for the STAR testing. So the standardized testing that we use to rank our children in our schools is tied to funding of schools and everything else. They're just changing the score level. So where it used to be, you needed 90 points to get an A, and now they're going to move that to 93 points to get an A, or whatever it is. They're simply moving it up. And this is going to reduce the ratings of our district as a whole and of our schools individually. And it will put some of our districts across the state in our schools and us also in danger of being taken over by the state the way that they did Houston ISD, because this is the tool that they use to take over HISD. And we all see what's going on with that. You got a corrupt person placed in charge by a corrupt governor that now are sending our public tax dollars for schools out of state to his own private charters. So it's kind of mind-boggling that it's all happening, because this should not be political or red team, blue team. It should be about the future of our society and the children of the state. So
yeah, and Rep, one of the things that I want to add on top of your points too is that the economic impact it has, right? Particularly in rural Texas and even in our suburban areas. One of the things that most people don't realize is that public schools and these school districts are the largest employers in their areas. So the more money you take away from public schools, the more that budget shrinks, the more layoffs that you have to do. And I'll give you a prime example. Happened right here in Cypher ISD. State hasn't increased its basic funding for public schools since 2019, even though those costs have risen about 25% in that time. And you all are feeling that in your pocketbooks. I mean, that's part of the reason why we have the president that we do now, because of inflation and the economy. Because of this, Cypher ISD had to cut $138 million from its budget last year. To put that in perspective, for 20 plus years, Cypher had an A rating from the TEA's version of the credit bureau. That's probably not going to happen this year because of that budget deficit they're facing. And what did they have to do? They had to eliminate librarians, and we We know how important it is for books to be accessible for kids to read. And then they had to cut bus routes to save money. And we know that so many people, like myself, rode the bus to school in the morning or after school and was trying to participate in sports or theater or music or whatever it was so we can broaden our horizons. So many other districts in our area had to do the same thing like KDISD. They faced steep cuts to their costs as costs rose while state funding stayed flat. So now we have House Bill 2, the school finance bill, and there's going to be a small per student funding boost. And I'm going to let you talk about it more, Rep. That's the boost is supposed to be enough to stop the painful cuts that's happening, but we know that's not going to happen. And so for the question I have for you is that will Cy-Fair and Katie still have to trim important services and staff, or is this little funding boost going to be enough to save some of these essential services and staff?
So I love the question, and this is some of the inside baseball stuff that I hope folks will come away from this conversation understanding more about, and the difference between what happens in real life, what we need in real life, and what these people say when they talk about it. So House Bill 2 is talked about, is what's the word that I'm touted as a historic investment in public education, which technically true. It's a 8 point something billion-dollar package. So it is truthfully the largest single increase in spending for public education in the history of Texas. Now, you can say that statement is true.
Yes.
It only goes halfway towards bridging the inflation gap since the last increase we've gotten. Let me just put it this way: like you are trying to get the state representative to cuss in public here.
I'm
Talking about
trying.
this
I'm
stuff.
trying.
And folks that know me or have sat with me in private know I swear a lot. And this is the kind of stuff that makes me swear. So here's the deal.
Rep, I just want you to also know Bishop O is on this call. So we gotta,
We got to keep it clean.
gotta
Yeah.
keep it clean.
So shout out to, I do not know why. I do know why. Sorry about that. My mail program is open, and that's why I'm getting notifications. So let me close that right quick. I'm so sorry. All right. So House Bill 2, the 8 point something billion, 8.6, 8.7.
Yeah, 8.7.
$8.7 billion school finance package. So it is a large number, and it is definitely helpful. Something is always better than nothing. But the current estimates by the comptroller of the state, who's a very conservative Republican named Glenn Hager, a former state senator. That conservative estimate, to make up for inflation since the last increase in public education funding, needed to be a raise in the basic allotment of $1,300 per student. So the basic allotment is the way that we calculate how much money a school or a district gets. It's based on how many students are in average daily attendance, and then for each student you get a certain amount of money. The basic allotment is the primary building block of that sum. And there's like safety allotments and special ed allotment, and there's other pieces that go into it. But the basic allotment is the basic piece. And to keep up with inflation, we needed a $1,300 per student increase in the basic allotment. Now, House Bill 2, in its first iteration, when it was first being debated in committee, was going to increase the basic allotment $200 when we need $1,300 just to account for inflation. But they did us a huge favor, and they raised that from $200 to $300. So we're going to get $300 per student. And there's, to be fair, there's some good stuff in there that adds money for special education. There's some stuff in there that will provide money for some teacher pay raises. It does not come close to being what we need. So the estimates on our districts had us at roughly increasing between $500 and $600 per student overall with all the pieces put together. When just to account for inflation, we needed $1,300. And then the voucher package comes in, and the estimate on that will knock us from some amount above to making our budget in sci-fair worse by $8 million in the first 2 years. And in Katy, that budget becomes worse by $6 million. So when they say a historic investment in public education, it's not even close to what we need. And when you put the vouchers on top of it, they are actually defunding our schools in a cycle when they're saying we're making a historic investment. And it's like, yo, we had a massive budget surplus. We could have fixed this problem, and y'all just didn't do it because you wanted to do a massive giveaway to your wealthy donors.
Yeah, and Rep, even to I sarcastically chuckle because the frustration just increases and increases when we talk about public education and how far behind we're falling. I mean, think about this. HB2 is supposed to be this historic windfall of money for public education. But experts say that if you pass this bill, in the next 2 years, you're still going to see potential campus closures, teacher layoffs, and budget cuts. You're going to be cutting positions, programs, and even for our teachers, because I know there's some Sci-Fair AFT folks on here and some educators as well too, you're going to see classroom sizes explode. And then we're going to be hiring teachers who aren't fully trained and certified in the way that should be doing, furthering the education gap that we have, particularly with third grade Black boys who cannot read at a historic rate in Texas. I mean, it's really, really frustrating. I get really frustrated. John knows how I feel about it. I go to him talking about all the time because this is really important. In order to have a thriving economy and having the eighth largest economy in the world here in the state of Texas, you need a thriving education system. You do. Your workforce has to be educated. And it's really frustrating to just go back to the Texas legislature and keep hearing the same thing over and over again when you know we need $1,300 per basic allotment and you start off at 200 and then you say, you know what, these kids aren't really worth it. Let's just increase it by 100 and say that's it. And yes, Rep. Rosenthal is right. There's always going to be some carrots in these bills, so that way the Republicans can go back and say, "Hey, we did this." And I don't mean to make this a partisan exercise, but it is. I mean, these are on partisan votes. I mean, you go look at any of these bills, it's always the R's versus the D's when it comes to public education on this. And we had two Republicans have the courage of their convictions to vote on the side of Democrats. But this is something that's really important. And you know, one of the things that we talk about, Rep, too, as well, is that, you know, part of this funding problem that we have is that Texas, their model is based off of attendance and not enrollment. And so it shortchanges a lot of school districts and a lot of these schools in underserved communities. And that's a model and a formula that's got to change in the state of Texas as well, too. So, you know, we're rooting for you, Rep. Rosenthal. We're rooting for you and the rest of you that are fighting for public education candidates. Before we get into questions from our crowd, this is a good reminder to remind y'all that power is really important. Part of the reason why these vouchers are getting passed is because we do not have a majority in the state house. We don't have a majority in the state senate. Dan Patrick controls the gavel in the Senate as the lieutenant governor, and the veto pen is with Greg Abbott. All of these folks are not with a pro-public education agenda. They're not with AFT's Bill of Rights. They're not caring about students. They're not caring about protecting teachers. So you have to go have those uncomfortable conversations with your neighbors, those uncomfortable conversations with teachers. You know, it's amazing. When I have conversations with some teachers, and I can't blame them because they got so many things going on, you have to remind them to go vote. And I'm like, we're trying to put more money in your pockets. Please go vote for pro-public education candidates. And then it's also a great reminder to remind a lot of you folks. I mentioned Bishop John Ogletree, who's on this call, was a former school board member. We have some school board elections coming up November 4th. And it really starts locally, because when your school board isn't putting pressure on legislators and not calling for special sessions to fully fund our public education, like we saw some of our school board members not do, it's a problem. And all of this starts locally. You got to go demand change at your school board so that way they can go talk to those legislators as well too. And speaking of that, Rep, talking about support, talk to us a little bit how what parents and students in our community can do to support you in this fight to put public education first. This bill technically isn't signed yet, and I know I talked a little about voting, but I'm sure there's some things that you probably have top of mind that I didn't mention that we could still do to help you in this fight.
Well, this particular bill is not signed, but it is on the way to the governor's desk, and he will sign it. But here's what to do: put pressure on your elected representatives. So we are your elected employees. You all are the ones in charge. And so you can call me, I'm already on board for you. Feel free to tell me what you want, but also you need to talk to your friends, your allies, your relatives, people that live in other parts of the state. Need to put pressure on these elected officials at every level. So your elected representatives, the Texas House, the Texas State Senate, a lot of folks don't know who we are or even that we exist. So first is awareness, and then second is contacting these folks. Also, as well, your school board and your state board of education. All these folks are involved in these decisions, and they need to feel, they need to deeply understand that public education is important to the people of Texas. And until the people of Texas stand up and assert that, these folks will continue to do what they do, and to forward scams like this. Is literally $1 billion cash giveaway out of your tax dollars. And so if you would rather see that money go um, to your children in your school districts to finance our schools and literally the future of our society, call your elected representatives, call their offices, email them, and school board as well. Show up at the school board meetings. I haven't been to one in a while because we're here in Austin, but I go to those meetings. I had people on the House floor today say, "Wait, you go to your school board meetings?" And I said, "Hell yeah, I do. I'm elected to forward public education. So I show up. I go to those places." But yeah, let those folks know it's important to you. And then the most important thing that we can do, while we may not be able to stop the flow that's happening right now in this cycle, there needs to be an electoral consequence for these actions. And until that happens, these people will continue doing what they're doing. By consequences, I mean FAFO, right? If they're going to mess around, then they need to find out. And the way for them to find out is for them to feel it electorally. So whether we're flipping seats in state house races, or if we have an opportunity for a statewide race, I mean, forgive interjecting politics, but we will have the opportunity to vote for a United States senator in this next cycle, and a number of other statewide positions. I cannot stress how important it is to make a difference there. We don't actually have to have the majority in the Texas House. We just have to have the people in charge understand that their political power will be challenged if they continue to screw over our kids in our public education.
Yeah. And Rep, you don't have to be political, but I can. Make sure make sure you go vote the left way. Make sure that we are, we're getting what we need as constituents in the state of Texas. We have some questions from the chat that I want to give you, and please forgive me if I screw up your name. As you can see, my last name, it gets butchered a lot, so please forgive me. I know how that feels. The first question is from Devina Jackson, and Devina asks, "Are they going to lower the ranking of public schools to encourage more parents to look at private schools?" That's a
Absolutely.
question
That's
of political strategy.
this is a perfect question, and it brings together the elements that we were just talking about. So yeah, you are exactly right, and that is what this move is. When you use this, they use this star test, so they're not even using a valid testing instrument. So they're stacking the deck to begin with, and then just just out of the blue, they say. No, no longer will a 90 give you an A. Now it's got to be 94. Or no longer will a 80 give you a B. Now it's got to be 86. What that means is all those schools that were near a borderline, their rankings are going to be reduced. And it's going to happen just because they changed the scale. Nothing to do with teaching, nothing to do with students or their performance or anything else. They're simply moving the goalposts and literally dropping the letter grades of all of our schools. And that is an intentional effort to undermine public education in Texas.
And it's going to be a political tactic they're going to use, right? And what's even going to be more discouraging is that the folks who are in public school that need these dollars the most, they can't go to these private schools because they can't afford them. And sure, some of the arguments is, oh, these private schools have endowments and things like that. One of the things that I always use is that we have Cypress Christian School in Cy-Fair. That's about $30,000, $40,000 a year. This ESA voucher scam bill is giving you $10,000 a year per student. And there's some guardrails in that, and you got to meet a certain income level and things like that. Well, what happens if a kid in Fifth Ward wants to go to Cypress Christian School? Forget the cost alone and how they still have to go find another $30,000. How are they going to get there?
Who's taking them and who's picking
Yeah,
them up?
there's not a bus. I mean, because that kid that's living in Fifth Ward most likely is going to need some kind of transportation. They have a parent that's probably working two jobs, both parents working two jobs, right? Like it's real life things that might get in the way of someone taking advantage of this voucher scam. And so, like Rep. Rosenthal has been saying, this really is welfare for the rich. And it's amazing how, for decades, one side of the political spectrum talks about welfare in the way they do, but will always find a way to give more money from government to the most wealthy folks. I mean, it is amazing, and that is a great question because that is absolutely a political tactic they're going to be using. Rep. Charlie Banks, who tells us hello. They are a Cy-Fair teacher and a Cy-Fair AFT member. We love Cy-Fair AFT. Those are our people. What do you think their goal is for public education? And that might be a very simple question, but let me tell you, there is a very complex answer to that question because they're trying to do a lot of things to our public education school system.
So it sounds like a simple question.
Yeah.
And the simple answer is um, they I mean, if you look at it, it's hard to imagine that they're not trying to dismantle public education in the state of Texas. I am waiting for them to bring the constitutional amendment to strike the public education section from the Constitution completely. But here's how it plays out. So you put together this cycle where you undermine the schools, underfund them so they don't have the budgets that they need. Then you complain about them underperforming and underserving, and then you cut their money again. And then you start, it's like that. And then you change the rules, and then you move the goalposts on the testing regimen, and you say, oh, your accountability. So now you're bringing this accountability thing into it where you're trying to use that to undermine the ratings of the schools when you have made this up in the first place. So you make up all this stuff to undermine schools, and then you use it to say your schools are failing and that's why we need school choice, and so we're going to need more private schools and more charters, and we're going to use your money to send the kids to that. But the truth is it only benefits 2 to 5% of the kids, and were we to do that, you would need to build a whole bunch of new private schools. So the bottom line is they want to it's kind of like a chop shop where they steal the cars and chop them up and then sell the pieces for money. So that's what's going on right here is they want to undermine the schools to derate them, reduce public confidence in public schools so that folks will buy into these political schemes to with these representatives who won't even meet with their constituents, right? And and then send our public school money to private institutions and not those institutions. That means you are giving the money to millionaires and billionaires, that
And
literally profit off our kids.
and Rep, to take it even a step further, it's really to, I don't say this lightly, it's really to devalue Black and brown people. Right? There's an assault going on in our public education school system. Let's start with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't call it DEI because they've turned that into this acronym that's supposed to mean something because they're afraid to say diversity. Because who wants to sound like a racist and say, hey, I don't believe in diversity? Who wants to
Or I
sound
don't believe in
equitable,
equity.
right? That they don't believe in equity, and who doesn't want to have friends and not be inclusive? So I say the whole thing. It's important that we do that and we take that framing back, because diversity, equity, and inclusion is really important. It's helped us a lot. And now taking that out of our textbooks, so we can't learn about Martin Luther King Jr., we can't learn about Nelson Mandela, we can't learn about Maya Angelou, we can't learn about Dolores Huerta, we can't learn about Cesar Chavez, we can't learn about the COVID vaccine. John, I, I think we lived through the COVID lockdown, right? That wasn't made up. That wasn't some made up science thing from Dr. Fauci. These shots that we took, like, it did protect us, but they weren't microchips in our body. And it's to take education away from young people who look like me, right? Black boys right now cannot read at a third grade level. I mean, that is what's happening in our public education school system, and they know it. They know it. They're not trying to see another President Barack Obama. They're not trying to. I mean, it is literally in our faces. They're using a KKK white hood as a red MAGA hat. Donald Trump has destroyed the Department of Education, meanwhile telling you, hey, you got to pay your student debt while you can't afford apartments or to buy a house or to buy a car. I mean, that's what public education is. It systematically dismantles institutions that are supposed to help the very people that are being lifted up by it. And so that's what they're trying to do with public education. It's for marginalized, disenfranchised communities who have black skin or brown skin, and put them further down in the bottom, and then raise the wealthy, the top 1%, and the folks that make over $1 million and the folks that make over $400,000. It's not to disparage them. Do that. That's part of the America promise that we've heard all of our lives. You should do that. But we should also be able to help those folks who are in need, that need public education, so they can get out of that and go be doctors, lawyers, firemen, police officers, union reps, in labor, trade, vocational, AI. We don't talk about artificial intelligence enough. We need more people in STEM. We need folks to understand what blockchain is, that we need more, but it can't just, they just can't look a certain way, right? It's got to be all of us. And so that's the biggest thing with public education for me. And I am like on fire about this because I'm seeing it in real time. And we've got to have uncomfortable conversations with our families, our friends, even some of the folks who don't call us friends. We need to have uncomfortable conversations with them and challenge them in what's happening in this country right now, because I refuse to go back. Rep, I know you refuse to go back because you're like the biggest advocate why I love you so much of all of these things. So that's really important. And Bishop O, who's on the front lines with us all the time, he's got a couple questions too, Rep. Will teachers get a pay raise? Which is we haven't given our teachers pay raise since 2019. That is unreal to me. And then, were Democrats able to water down the voucher bill?
So excellent questions. Although there will be less teachers because of the budget cuts, the mandate is some of them will get a pay raise, not all, but some, and it will be based on service and stuff like, and different things. There's some incentive pay for new teachers and whatnot. It won't come close to the raise that they would need just to deal with inflation. But the straight answer to will teachers get a pay raise is yeah, some will.
No.
Now, the question about were Democrats able to water this down in any way? Republicans on party line voted down every single amendment that we made. And that is no lie. And this went on all day, all night. We finished that debate at something like 3 o'clock in the morning. So, and we're in the House floor, 9 a.m. to 3 a.m. is what that was. And they would not take a single amendment from us, not one. Even the ones that were like, hey, if you're serving this legislature, you don't get the $10,000. Now they were cool for voting for that. And hey, how about if you make over $1 million a year, you don't get this voucher? And they were like cool for voting for that. So I'm sorry to report the Democrats were not able to water down the bill. I'm proud of the fight that we had, and I was part of the organizing team where we were working the amendments and trying to get people to take them, And although I've had people ask me why I wasn't at the microphone very much that day, and probably I should have spoke out more, it takes all of us working together and doing the different roles. And with a team of 60 people, I was just trying to help out every way I could. I'm kind of a team player, but no, they did not take anything from us. And so we did make them take some really awkward, unpleasant, and uncomfortable votes. And I promise we will be using that against the Republicans and against the governor in this next election cycle.
Yeah. And Rep, it's all good that you weren't on the mic. You're a workhorse, not a show horse, and that's why we love you. That's why we love you.
It's so true, though.
Lisa McGuire asked, and this is actually pretty creative. Is there some way we can create a temporary designation of a Cy-Fair elementary school as private for purposes of receiving ESA funding? Will rural schools get extra money per student? We should call.
I love this woman so much. Lisa,
call Dr. Kelly.
Thank you for being on, and also for all that you do with your volunteering work. And I know you're a precinct chair, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. But this is really sharp thinking, and it's the sort of thing that can be used to challenge this law. One of the other things that we do during debate is ask very narrow, very specific, pointed questions that point to legislative intent, because there are going to be court cases over this, and suing the state, suing the governor, suing the Texas Education Agency. There's already been one over the change in the ratings stuff that the superintendent put out a message about, and truly some unfortunate stuff going down there. But this is the type of creative thinking that is helpful in those kinds of fights. Now, designate an elementary school as private for the purpose of taking vouchers. I love the idea, because we do not get $10,000 a student right now.
No, we do not.
The basic allotment is going to move from 6180 to whatever it is, 6400.
Yeah, 6400, some change.
When the national average is 12,000, right?
Right.
Like we just about need to double it to meet the national average of pure per student funding. But we're not going to come close to that. So they're good questions and good thinking. I wish we could do that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I don't believe rural schools are going to get extra money per student. I think that's just a flat rate all around. So thank you for those questions, Lisa. Angela Martin Greer. Hi, Miss Angela. What is the likelihood that school board elections will officially become partisan? I know there's a bill floating around. I don't believe that's going to happen. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Republicans like where they're at right now with school board elections, where they can keep talking about that it's nonpartisan. And so that way they can still shove all the partisan stuff down our throats, and from the other aisle. And on the other side of that, we have to play better. But yeah, the likelihood of that is to pass. I mean, they file that bill damn near every session, and it doesn't go anywhere. It might get heard in committee some sessions, it might not. But the likelihood of that happening is very slim to none.
Yeah, it hasn't made it to a floor calendar in my 4 sessions that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Anna Baker asks, can a family take money to try homeschooling and then change their mind mid-year and enroll their child in public schools?
The answer to that question actually is yes.
Yeah, I know, that's why I'm laughing.
So the money is less than the private school voucher, but it's still some money.
Right.
And so it's set up to allow families to literally game the system, like try homeschooling their kids half a semester and then send them back to the public school, and the public school can't turn them away. And this creates an even worse situation, because the public school didn't get the money for that student, but now they have to educate them anyway.
Right. That's
and all of our teachers on here, I know y'all are down for the fight, and will do your level best to educate every child that walks in that room. But we should not be taking the rug out from under your feet like that.
Right. And the last question that I have, because we'll definitely want to respect y'all's time. We told y'all 7:30 at 7:24, and John and I can talk a lot, So Lori, okay, I'm going to say this like 2 different ways, and if I have a 50-50 chance here. I feel like if I screw it up, I'm sorry. Lori Vasky asks, what's the chance of tax increase to help fund public education?
So I know, Lori, and you are dead right. The chance is 100%. So I can pretty much promise you we're going to end up paying more taxes. And what they did in the tax bill, and we're going to see this too, to raise the homestead exemption to lower your tax burden. It's not going to work well for everybody because what ends up happening is it creates a gap in public education funding, which is fine when you're running a budget surplus and the state can pay that. But as soon as the state budget surplus is not as fat or as large, they're going to have to raise your taxes to make up the difference. And that's just the bottom line. That's how it's going to go.
Yeah, and again, remember, certain folks will leave here, will leave session June 2nd, and will go to their districts and tell them that they lowered your tax burden, whether it's property taxes or whatever it is, it will tell you that. And then at the end of the year, you're going to get a property tax bill and you're going to curse really bad and not in a good way. So yeah, and in closing, Rep, for me, like I said earlier, mid conversation, elections have consequences. They do. Elections have consequences, and we're about to see our property taxes increase. You're about to see school districts like Cy-Fair who have maintained a healthy amount in their books and their reporting and how they budget things out face another deficit because they've expanded and created this ESA program, which, by the way, hasn't worked in states like Arizona, Ohio, Michigan, Florida.
Florida.
Some of these states, they have it hasn't worked. And why they think it's going to work here in Texas, I have no idea. But elections have consequences. And like we've mentioned, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you should go vote for pro public education candidates. The reason is because it leads to economic prosperity in the state of Texas. We can't talk about the Texas miracle. You can't talk about having the eighth largest economy in the world without an educated workforce. That is as simple and plain as day. And then the other thing I'd like to remind everyone is, again, if you're in the Cy-Fair area, Cy-Fair ISD, we have school board elections November 4th. You have to vote. It is imperative that you vote for pro public education candidates that are going to arise here pretty soon. It's too important to this district. It's a district I grew up in. It's a district I love. Lowry Elementary, Aragon Middle School, Langham Creek High School. These schools shaped me. These schools have helped me be where I'm at, to where people can call me a community leader or whatever it is. It's put in an email. I'm honored by those platitudes, but the reality is that Cy-Fair shaped me. That's why I'm able to do that. And when we're taking money away from our school districts like Cy-Fair, it hurts. And it hurts kids that look like me. It hurts the kids that are moving to the school district because they want to be taught in Cy-Fair because we have the best school districts in Cy-Fair. And KDISD as well, too. It's a blossoming school district and one of the top rated school districts in the state. So my call to action to you all is get civically engaged, get civically involved. Session is not over. It ends June 2nd. Call your legislators, put pressure on them, let them know that you're about pro public education and keeping money in pro public education, giving our teachers pay raises, spending more money on our students, and quite frankly, spending more money on the future. And with that said, Rep. Rosenthal, I'll let you close out and then let everyone go eat dinner and go watch the NFL draft. Go Texans.
Oh, NFL draft. Hopefully there will be some good news, but no. One of the things that makes House District 135 literally a destination district in Texas is our fantastic public schools. Cy-Fair public schools. Like, raise your hand if you moved here to have your kids in public schools, like I did. I literally live here. Well, I'm in Austin now, but I literally live behind Traders Village because me and my wife wanted to have our kids in Cy-Fair public schools. So it's not just Cy-Fair, it's all the schools across the state. But if you are civically minded and if you're on this call, it's because you support public education. There are very few things as important to our area, our district. Literally, our society is in the future of our society is in the hands of the children, and the children are in the hands of your teachers in public schools. And so there is nothing more important in my mind than educating our kids, and that's why this is so critical. It has to. If you're a single single issue voter, this has to be the issue. This is it. This is your kids. And so I appreciate everybody on this call. Bring your friends, your family into this fight because our children are worth it. And thank you all. Thanks to the team. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been a long day, and this has been the best part of it. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Rep. Rosenthal. Thank you so much, everyone joining us. Thank you, Ari, Devin, Karina. Y'all are the best. Till next time, we will see you all soon. Please go have a wonderful rest of your night, a great dinner, and hopefully the Texans draft really, really well. Good night, everyone.
Good night.